Hi, I'm Jeff Ludy, the owner of Houston Window Experts, and I just want to say thank you for coming to this channel and watching this video today about anatomy of a window. We're going to cover anatomy of a vinyl window. We're going to show you one particular thing about aluminum windows, and then of course a little bit about wood windows, so you have more information, because if you've watched our videos, you've heard me say before that information is power, and the more power, the more information you have, the better decisions you're going to make on buying a window. So Clay actually had the idea to do this video today about anatomy of a window, and guess what? Just this week, I got a chance in my own personal life to try to understand anatomy a little bit better, because my wife, Sandra, she stubbed her toe and it actually broke in 4 places. Oh my gosh. So when we were thinking about calling the doctor and it's like, hey, I think I hurt my toe. I was like, how do you describe the toe? Which toe is it? Well, it turns out in layman's terms, they called it toe number 4. It was toe number 4 on her right foot. I'm like, okay, that sounds like, I don't know if that's Latin or what, but they call it toe number 4. I'm sure there's a fancy name for that. If you're a podiatrist, in the comments, let me know what toe number 4 is called so I can sound a little more educated when we go back for our follow-up. So, anatomy of a window, right? You want to understand windows. You want to know what is a window component, which is what when somebody refers to it. So I thought let's just cover that together. So this is a vinyl window as an example, and we'll spend most of our time here. It's made by Windsor, and this is what's called their Classic Series. So of course, obviously you have an outside of a window and inside of the window. I'm not going to go into that great a detail, but let me tell you like what this is right here. This is called the head of the window. Okay, so up here at the top is the head, and down here is the stool of the window. Sometimes some people call it the stool, some people call it the foot of the window, but this is the top and the bottom, and then on the sides we have what are called the jambs. So this is your jamb on the side of the window. On the inside you'll see this as well, but this is the meeting rail in a window that goes up and down like a single hung or a double hung. This is where the top sash and the bottom sash meet, so that's called the meeting rail as well. One of the things that you'll also notice on a window is these grids. Some windows won't have them, some windows will have them, and there's more than one type of grid. We actually have a video devoted just to the grids on windows, so you can talk about that and learn about it. But this is called an SDL grid, Simulated Divided Light, because if you notice here, this grid actually sits on the surface of the glass. It's not between the glass. I'll show you one where it's got it between the glass. This is an actual more realistic grid. This is one big sheet of glass here, right? Double pane sheet of glass. But these are laid over the top to create what looks like actual divided lights. So lights, L-I-T-E-S, that's a term given to this look, right? So this would be a 1 light sash down here, and this would be a 3 light sash. So you notice I just gave you another anatomy lesson here. Sash, these are called sashes, the part of the window that's operable. This is a sash. So you've got a 3 light sash here with SDL grid, Simulated Divided Light, with what's called a shadow bar between. And we'll see if we can get a close-up on that, but a shadow bar is the little part that goes between the glass to actually give us a more realistic looking grid. Now, we talked about grids on the surface, SDL. We talked about grids between the glass. Let me show you grids between the glass. Here's an example of a window made by NT where the grids are between the glass. See, I can't touch that grid. It's not, I can't feel it. It's between the 2 panes of glass. Really convenient and great for keeping the window clean. But if you notice, it's not as realistic looking as the one we had over there, because once it gets behind the low E coating on the glass, if you notice, that is a white grid, but it's not nearly as white as the window. So what are the benefits to grids between the glass? Easier to clean. What are the benefits to an SDL? They're a little more attractive. So that's kind of the majority of the outside of a window. Oh, before I go on, let me mention that we call these grids. Some people call them muntins, okay? So it depends on who you're talking to as to what they're referring to. Of course, on the inside, you're gonna have your locks, right? Some windows come with 1, some come with 2, different types of locks. This is called an actual lift rail right here. So it helps me lift the window, gives me a place to lift. Some window brands will actually put 2 lift rails. They'll have one there, they'll have one here, which is kind of nice if you have a really tall window and it's kind of lower, maybe more at your waist. It's easier to lift from the middle than to have to bend down low to lift from there. So that's called the lift rail. These are called tilt latches. This particular window actually tilts. So if you notice, I can squeeze this in on both sides, and then I tilt that in. There's that little latch. It's called a tilt latch. while I've got this open, I'm going to go ahead and point out to you the balancer. A balancer is what helps the window stay up when it's open so it doesn't fall down. And if you notice here, this little thing that's on the side here, this actually has, can you see the little string going in there? There's a string that goes across to the top here. There's a spring inside of here, and it connects to the bottom of this sash. This sash has a part called a shoe that sits down inside that, and that is what supports it so it can go up and down. There are two types of balancers for windows. There may be more than two, but two that I'm familiar with. One is called block and tackle, and this is the block and tackle where it has the string. The other one is called a constant force balancer. Oh, there's a great debate about which is better. I think they're both exceptional. I think one of the things that constant force might do better than block and tackle is it's constant force, meaning that the way it's designed, you're always going to feel the same amount of force going through the window operation, whereas on a block and tackle, you feel more of it the higher you go up. So let's see if I can show you what this one looks like. Again, tilt latches here. I'm going to tilt this in, and it's right there. See that little white coil? That's actually like a spring steel, all coiled up. Think about a roll of stamps if you're old enough to remember stamps. A roll of stamps. That's what looks like a roll of stamps made out of spring steel. And if you come right around here, Clay, look at that shiny kind of gold looking on the back wall there inside of that. See that right there? That's actually that steel. It's coiled up and it's going all the way down to the bottom of that shoe. So as this goes up and down, that steel, that spring steel, coils back up inside of there. So that's called a constant force balancer compared to a block and tackle balancer. Another thing you should see while we're standing right here is when I tilt this back out, right here you have what's called an integrated meeting rail. I don't know if you can see or not, but I'll pull my pocket knife out. This is actually like a little receiver tray. See how my knife goes down inside of there? See, that's actually, it's got a receiver tray in there. And then on the top part here, it's got another receiver tray. See how my knife goes up inside of there? So what happens is when I close this window, ouch, I think I might, no I didn't, okay. When I close this window and go to lock it, that top and that bottom do this. And that's why it's called an interlocking meeting rail. What does that do for you? Well, it's gonna give you more security. It's gonna give you better air leakage and water penetration numbers. And so just about every window now uses that, but that's really cool. When it comes to windows, you're gonna hear the term fusion welding. Fusion welding is where they'll take this jamb. Remember we talked about the jamb and the head and then the bottom of the window, and where they put them together and weld them. It's actually a fusion weld right here. There's actually a hot knife that heats up those two pieces together, and then it just kind of melts the vinyl onto itself. That's a fusion welded corner. Weather stripping. Any window is, well, any good window is going to have weather stripping. And here it is on this one. If you notice, this is a triple fin weather stripping. It's got it on this side, it's got it on that side. And in this particular case, it's color coded to the exterior of the window, which I love. Not all brands will actually color code their weather stripping, but in this case they do. And I love that because you don't see any of that white weather stripping like a lot of window companies do from the outside. Now, I wanted to show you something on another window, not that one, that's from the outside, because it's hard to see it on a black window, but here you can see it on this white window. This is called the glazing bead. The glazing bead is this little piece right here. If I had to replace this glass because it broke or failed or something happened to it, to get it out of there, I would pop these glazing beads off. I could tilt my glass out, put a whole new glass unit in there, and then I'd put my glazing bead back in. So there's two types of glazing bead. One is called a pounding glazing bead, which is what this is. It's nice and flat. It's really strong and heavy duty. And the other is more of a standard glazing bead. It's more of a kind of a clamshell shaped, really thin. I'm not a fan of that. So we always upgrade all of our windows to have a pound-in glazing bead. When you go to buy a window, you ought to ask them, is that a pound-in glazing bead? Because I think you're gonna like the pound-in glaze. First of all, it looks better. Number two, it's a lot stronger. And obviously if they charge more money for it. If they charge more money for it, it's probably better. Okay, so that's something for you to remember on that. One of the other things I wanted to mention too is that, you know, the glazing bead holds in the IG or IGU stands for Insulated Glass Unit. Insulated Glass Unit, IGU. So when you get a window, it's not going to just be an outside piece of glass and an inside piece of glass. If it's a double pane window, it's going to be an actual whole unit. There's going to be an outside and inside, and there's what's called a spacer between. And we're going to put a link to a video about low-E coatings, and we get into great depth about IGUs and IGs. But when somebody says this has a 3/4 inch IG, for example, you're like, oh, I know what that means. That's insulated glass. Jeff from Houston Window Experts, he educated me on that. You know, you trip up your salesman sometime. Ask him some of these questions. Let's see how much he knows. So the inside pane of glass, the outside pane of glass, and the spacers between them, right? What's called an overall IGU means from the outside here to the inside here, counting that spacer, how much is that overall IGU depth? On most windows, good windows, it's going to be 3/4 of an inch. And then sometimes if the window's bigger, they need more space. It'd be 7/8. I've seen them all the way up to like 1.25 inches for really, really big openings. Why? Well, because the glass can't be too close together. Glass flexes, and they would never want the outside piece of glass to touch the inside piece of glass. So the greater that IGU, overall IGU depth is, the bigger a glass that they can accommodate. And you have to remember too, when a window gets bigger, the glass has to get thicker. So if you get thicker glass, you also need more dead space in the middle to fill your argon gas, etc. But I got a great video on that. You're gonna want to watch that. So I think I've covered pretty much everything there is about vinyl windows. Before we move on, well, I say not everything. There's a lot more. But before we move on to what I should check in with my assistant here, Bradley. Did I miss something?
The style.
The window style. Oh yes. Okay. What else?
The sill.
The sill. Okay. Well, yeah. This is the sill. Got that. Was there anything else?
Weep holes.
Ah!
Block frame.
I'm sorry. Beep, cut. No. Okay. So I'll cover those. The window style. So the style is the side of a sash. Okay. Style is S-T-I-L-E, not S-T-Y-L-E. Okay. So you want to be in style, but a different kind of style. So that's the style. And then we did not cover weep holes. Okay. So every window has some way to evacuate water in the event it fails. On this one, this has what's called a sloped sill. So if you notice, there are no weep holes here, and I'll show you what weep holes look like. On this particular window, if you forgot your window open like that a little bit and water went there, it would not go into the house because it has this water dam across the back, and it allows the water now to just flow forward away from the window. That's a sloping sill. On this window right here, same manufacturer, by the way, same brand, same level of quality. But if you notice, there's no slope sill. This is actually integrated bottom rail that's just like the side rails are. So if water were to get into here, come this way and look at those little holes down there, okay? That little hole would allow any water to escape, and it would come out of the front of the window on what's called a weep hole. And right down here, this actually has an integrated weep hole. You can't see it. It's actually, it's cut in there. There's some slots cut in there to allow the water to come out. Look on this unit, back here to this, here's another Amsco window. This actually has a weep hole cover, and so there's a hole behind there, and it has a little flap, a little lid, so when water's in there, it just pushes it open, and then the water comes out. But the reason for that little flap to be on there is so that when there's not water coming out and pushing water out, you don't end up with like, here in Houston, we have these mud daubers that love to fly inside of things and build a nest. So it keeps the bugs from going in there and building a nest on that. Okay, what else did I miss?
Just the block frame, nailing plan.
So the frame types of frame? Okay. So when it comes to most windows, you're gonna have about 3 options of frame to order. So typically when you're replacing a window in a home and you already have a window there, you're gonna get what's called a block frame. If you notice, this is just like a block, right? And so it would sit right inside between your brick, for example, or between your stucco, or between your siding, or whatever the case is, and it's gonna go in like that. Then the other option you have is if you're doing, say, a new construction project, it's gonna be almost identical to this window. See how they're almost identical? But this still has the nailing fin on it. So this, in new construction environment, this is going to go up against your studs, your 2x4, when they're building your house. And it's gonna have caulking around the back of it. It's gonna have nails coming through here, or screws, and then it's gonna have a flashing tape over it. So this is nailing fin application. Once we're doing a remodel or retrofit application, This would be in the way. This can't work anymore, right? It's in the way of us being able to put the new window in. We're not going to take the brick off to put a new window in. So we don't want it with a nailing fin, and that's why we get it with a block frame. Now something you should see is, see that little groove right there? That little groove? That's where the nailing fin was. When manufacturers make these extruders that extrude this material, they make it with everything on it. So this window actually, when it was made at the factory, came with one of those on it. But before they shipped it to us, they ran it through a special machine that actually cuts that off of there for us. So we don't have to do it in the field. We could take it off in the field, but it takes more time, and they've got all the equipment, so we let them do it. A third type of common window frame is what's called a stucco flange or a flush fin. And if you notice here, this is just like that block frame that I showed you a minute ago. In fact, it's the exact same brand of window. It's the same thing, but if you notice, this has got this really wide flange sticking off the edge of it. What's that for? Well, I want you to notice how it's got some different grooves in there. See those grooves? So we can actually score that in the field, and we can cut that off to make it not so wide if we want to. But the purpose for something like this would be that, let's say that you had stucco, and you were concerned about when you pull the window out, some of that stucco around the edge of the window is going to get damaged. If that's the case, you can order this, we call it a stucco flange. It's also called a flush fin, where it's going to now cover, right? So here's the damage area. When we put the window over it, it'll cover that area that might have slightly got damaged. Makes for an easier, quicker install because you don't have to be as careful. We don't like doing that. We like being very careful and getting it out without this big flange on it. But it also, if you know you're gonna have a problem, sometimes this is the best way to go. I like just being careful and using the standard block frame. Why? Well, because look how much glass space you're gonna lose by the time you add this big, you add this big extra wide part onto it. Now from the outside of the house, this looks like a really thick, chunky window, where this looks a lot cleaner and a much better profile. So those are the three common types of frames that you can get. Now, you should know that windows, if you're talking to somebody and you're like a DIY guy and you're working on a window, that windows are measured in width first by height. So like this particular window is 29.5 by 55.5. Okay, so this would be my width and then my height. And most of the time when you're replacing windows, you're going to be using what's called net frame sizes. So when I say I want a 35.5-inch window, I really mean that frame needs to measure from one end to the other 35.5 inches. If I'm doing new construction, I might call that a 36-inch window, meaning I'm talking about my rough opening, the opening of my wall, which is 36 inches, which is why they would make this 35.5. So most window companies, when you order rough opening sizes, they're going to take off a 1/2 inch on the width, 1/2 inch on the height, because that's the size of your opening, and the window needs to be a little smaller so you can adjust it and get it in there. So that's rough opening versus net frame size, and it's always width by height, okay? Don't call me and say I need a 72 by 36 window, because I'm thinking it's this wide and it's that tall, and you're thinking it's this wide and that tall. So just another little pointer there. What else? Did I miss anything?
That's it, we're good.
Okay, so I'll point out something about, thank you, Bradley. I'll point out something about aluminum windows. So everything I said about vinyl windows is pretty much true when it comes to aluminum windows. The only thing that you should be looking for in the anatomy of an aluminum window is to ask the question of whether or not it's thermally broken, or some companies call it thermally improved, because you have to remember, a lot of people are replacing aluminum windows for what reason? Because they're inefficient, right? Like aluminum is such a great conductor of heat and cold that it's used on NASCAR engines. It's used on a heat sink for an amplifier or something. But when it comes to your house, keeping it comfortable and not spending a lot of money on your utility bills, you want a thermally improved or thermally broken window. So this is what's called the thermal break. Here's the outside aluminum frame. Here's the inside aluminum. This one happens to have a wood on it as well. And this part between the two here, this part right here is a non-conductive break. This does not conduct heat and cold like the aluminum does. So that's why it's called a thermal break, or thermally broken, or thermally improved aluminum. So good for you to know about that. So let's move on to wood windows, because there are some things that you should know about wood windows that are in addition to what I described here. Now, on this wood window, this is made by Pella. If you notice, there's no lift rail. I had to kind of do that. Now they do make pull handles. You can get a pull handle, which is a little handle that goes on here, and you can open and close the window. And if you notice on this wood window here, this area right here, this is called the jamb right here. Okay, this is the jamb of the window like we saw over there. This one happens to have a jamb liner. See, this liner right here exists so that I have now something pretty and something that's covered. Whereas in the vinyl window, turn around behind you, I want you to see. In the vinyl window, I can actually see inside the jamb here, right? There's no particular jamb liner or jamb cover there. Not that it's ugly, it's just that if I was painting a window, how would I paint that? I couldn't paint that, right? That wouldn't work. Over here, I can paint because this is going to be made out of the same wood as the window itself is made out of, and so this is called a jamb liner. There's another type of jamb liner as well that's not paintable, and that's called a compression jamb liner. A compression jamb liner is just like it sounds. It uses compression to stay in place. So if you notice here, this is a compression jamb liner. I am squeezing that, okay, and that is being compressed in and out. That's what holds this sash in place. So if I squeeze that in, I can do that. I squeeze that in, I can do that. And that's how I tilt my window here. So on a compression jamb liner, I tilt my window by pressing on those compression points. They call this a luxury liner. Ooh, isn't that a nice word for it? This beautiful jamb liner here that covers that, in order for me to tilt the window on this, I have to have a tilt latch like I had over on the other one. But come around the front, I want you to see something on this. On this one, what I do is I open the window a little ways, and then I reach my finger inside there and over here, and I pull those together, and now I can actually tilt it. So look over here on this side now. See, those are concealed. So this is what we call a concealed tilt latch. And I can reach behind the glass and do that to tilt my unit in. Now, why would I want to tilt it in? Not for cleaning. It's too much work to clean your windows that way. Just, you know, you deserve it. Hire someone to clean your windows. But if it actually failed, if this broke and something happened to this unit, it doesn't have a glazing bead like we talked about on vinyl. In this case, we replaced the whole sash because the glass is actually built in. The IGU is built in around the entire frame. That's why also almost every window that you see that's made out of wood, if I can get this top down, is going to be double hung. Why? Because that's the only way they can ever be able to replace the glass on this, is to be able to tilt the whole unit out. So on wood windows, you're always going to have double hung windows, whereas what I showed you over there was a single hung. Great video on single hung versus double hung, truly worth watching. And then you see, here are the releases. The concealed jamb liner for this is right here at the top, so I can tilt this one. At first I'd have to take the bottom out, then I could tilt the top in. But this is concealed up inside of the head. Remember head, we talked about the head. And then here's your slope sill. Another slope sill, you notice that? On wood windows, the slope sill is going to be, typically in the US, we're going to see an 8-degree slope sill. There are some older houses that have 14-degree, but you don't see much of that anymore. So this is the sill. Now, one thing different on a wood window that you won't find on a vinyl home is going to be you have what's called a subsill. Now, that's not a part of the window. Subsill is the part that goes under the sill here, and on almost every house, that part is like made out of wood, and it sticks out a little bit further. And then what you don't see on this window, but you would also find on most wood windows, is you'd have what's called a brick mold. There'd be a trim piece right around here. That's not a part of the window. Now, we can get windows with brick mold, and that's what that little groove is for. Here's another anatomy thing for you. This is called an accessory groove. See that little groove? I could buy different accessories from the manufacturer that are color matched, and I can snap those into there as part of this window. So I could do a subsill made by the manufacturer. I could do frame filler, which is flat. I could do brick mold, which has got a brick mold curve to it, and they could all snap into the accessory groove. And that's something you're going to find on nicer windows, like, example, Pella, Marvin, Anderson, Windsor. Your top tier guys are going to have that stuff available to you. What else can I tell them about wood windows? What did I not cover, Bradley?
The cladding.
Cladding! Okay, thank you. Oh, gosh, it's so good to have a helper. Where is my cladding? Oh, Bradley, what else did I not cover?
That's it.
That's it? Okay, follow me. We'll take a little quick tour, and I'm going to show you what the cladding is on a wood window. I could have done it right there, but it's easier just to show you a nice cutaway. So I'm in our showroom here where we have 19 brands of windows and doors. We're in Houston, Texas. And by the way, some exciting news. We've been so busy, we're growing so much, thanks to you, that we had to go out and rent more space. We just added 26,000 square feet to our portfolio, about 4/10 of a mile away. So if you ever come visit with me, we can go over there too, and I can show you what we're doing over there. So, okay, so here's an aluminum clad wood window. if you notice, here's my wood on this window, and there's my aluminum. So obviously wood is beautiful, right? And we love that, so we keep it on the inside, but because it doesn't do well outside, especially not in Houston, especially not if you have sprinklers hitting it every day, right? So if you call me and say, Jeff, my wood windows are rotting, why would I want wood? I agree with you, why would you want wood? But you might want the beauty of the wood on the inside, but you want the impervious and weather resistant materials on the outside. And that's why we have aluminum outside, wood inside, and this is called a wood cladding on a window. Some people call it aluminum cladding on wood, some people call it wood clad window. It's actually, technically, it should be called an aluminum clad wood window. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this video about anatomy of a window. If I missed something you'd like us to cover in another version of this video, please say so in the comments. If you live somewhere else around the country, not in Houston, and you're like, oh gosh, Jeff, do you know anybody in my area? Yes, actually, we probably do. We know a lot of great window and door companies all across America. If you will go down below in the description, we'll give you a way to contact us about that. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. We'll talk again real soon.